Welcome to the MetaView podcast. Hear these non-fungible conversations. They will yield you great knowledge and perspective. But beware, they might also make your brain go boom. So watch your step, because this rabbit hole goes deep. Good luck and have fun. Welcome, Visa, to the MetaView podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you, but our listeners don't necessarily know you. So would you mind giving a brief intro to yourself?
Oh, sure. So, hi, my name is Visa. Most people usually know me from Twitter, where I tweet a lot. I'm the author of a couple of books. So, my first book was called Friendly Ambitious Nerd, which is a kind of a guide to being prolific online and making friends and just having a good time on the internet. Someone described it as it's like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations for Twitter addicts, which I really like. And my second book is called Introspect, and it's basically a self-help book. It's remixing Emerson, Nietzsche, Joseph Campbell. It's just kind of the self-help book that I wish someone had written for me. So yeah, I'm an author. I've written a couple of books. I tweet a lot. People on Twitter tend to know me as the guy that does very elaborate Twitter threads with lots of quote tweets and a lot of interconnected threads about all kinds of nerdy topics. And I'm always encouraging people to make friends online and to kind of try and cultivate productive, fun scenes where people can make friends and do interesting stuff together.
All right, thank you. Yeah, you're not like a usual guest for the MetaView podcast, because in this podcast I try to get like people who have this sort of a bigger picture view, talk about like global trend shifting, whatever. But you're like more down to earth and like more practical, and I really like that.
I do also have, grand schemes, and if you've seen my Domino's meme, it starts out with people making friends, but the idea is really to build a global network of friendly, ambitious nerds in all over the world, every major city. And the long-term end game is quite ambitious, So it starts out very down to earth, but the end goal is very. We're not there yet, but as we kind of get more and more people involved in that worldview, I think we will be able to do bigger and bigger things. So it is pretty grand.
Yeah, that makes sense, but it's like it's more practical. It's not like so up in the air. Like it starts with something super simple, like follow your interests, be a friendly, ambitious nerd, and like it all flows from there. It's not starting with the bigger picture, and that's what I like for change. And you want to talk more about being a friendly, ambitious nerd and the book that you wrote?
Sure. So I never actually set out to write that book in particular. So for me, it's something that's always come very naturally. I grew up reading a lot of books in libraries, and I've always loved libraries. And when I encountered the internet, I felt that the internet was like a super library that I could publish to directly. So for me, it always almost had a semi-religious kind of, like the internet is my home, it's my church, it's this place that I view very, it's very precious to me. And, it took me a while to realize that not everybody feels that way. So I've always just been the way I am, and I've always been very optimistic, very earnest. And I used to play in a band, and even in the band that I used to play in, we used to try and kind of advocate for our local music scene to be more, kind of have more people get involved, think bigger, and kind of be more welcoming and grow the scene. And so I would write about that sort of thing all the time, and people would respond well to that. And people would ask me, hey, I like your tweets, I like your blog posts, do you have a book? I would love to buy your book if you have a book. And so I found myself thinking, all right, I could write about a bunch of different things, but whatever your first book is going to be the book that people will introduce you as the author of. It'll kind of define you. And so I came up with Friendly Ambitious Nerd actually by asking people what they liked about the stuff I was already writing. And people would say, oh, you're so encouraging. You're always asking people to be friendlier to one another, to get better at kind of responding encouragingly. You're always asking people to be more prolific, to write more, do more. And you're always like doing all these very like curious exploratory threads about like I would be curious about something and then go like on Wikipedia and read stuff and piece together some notes and whatever I think is interesting. So like when I assembled all the feedback that people gave me about what they liked about my writing, I found that it's like stuff about being a better friend, stuff about being more ambitious, and stuff about being very curious. So I assembled all of that into my first book called Friendly Ambitious Nerd, and it was I just found myself having a good time on the internet, and that's not as common as I wish it were, and as I think many people would wish it were. And so so the book is really a consolidation of all of the things that I think have helped me have a good time on the internet, and I just want to help more people also have a good time on the internet.
Makes sense. And then what would you recommend to the younger people, to people who like didn't experience all this, like the quote unquote old internet, but just like join straight into this internet of like one big arena, or like a few big arenas like Twitter, TikTok, whatever?
I mean, you can still find people that you resonate with, that you feel like you like. If you have an exchange with someone that you thought went kind of well and you like it, like you should DM them, and you can DM them, right? You can make friends, and I think these days, like youngsters as well, they have more of a sense of like you don't need any one online identity to be your entire experience. So you can have multiple alts. Like even on Instagram, they have like Finsters, and I don't know how they do it on TikTok, but like you can have multiple accounts, and you can have like locked accounts. You can follow people that you trust and have them follow you back, and so you can kind of create these like micro clusters of relatively quiet spaces where it's not so chaotic. And I mean, I think it's a very natural human impulse to want different degrees of intimacy and exposure at different scales. So even in real life, right? Like at home we lock our doors and we have privacy for ourselves at home, and you can invite friends over if you want. And then you can go to like a cafe, which is like there's a bit more interaction, but it's still kind of limited to whoever is in the cafe. And then you can go to like a public park or a festival, or like some city square, town square. And so every one of these different spaces has different vibes and different amounts of exposure to strangers. And so my recommendation is to try and like have different scales of exposure to public or to like strangers. And then I mean, you got to ask yourself, what do you want? Like, do you just want to observe what everyone else is doing? Like if that's the case, that's pretty straightforward. You don't need to do anything. But if you want to be a creator, right, if you want to talk out loud about stuff, you want to have conversations, there is a bit of a learning curve as you discover how people respond to whatever you do. That can be so for me, I went through that a long time ago, so I kind of take it for granted. But it can be disorienting and overwhelming sometimes, especially if you are getting if you said something wrong and people are mad at you or stuff like that. But it happens, and it's rarely the end of the world. And you can usually talk to more experienced people and ask them how to think about it. And usually they'll say stuff like, just take a break, come back. Like what seems urgent and chaotic in the moment, usually like in a few days everything kind of blows over. So try to relax, which I know it's not easier said than done, but it helps to, I think, to reflect on longer term cycles. So I do recommend reading like biographies of people, right? You really get a sense of how over the scale of a human lifetime, like decades come and go, right? Like entire new technologies come and go, entire new media opportunities, all kinds of things can change, and like the whole world looks different every 5 to 7 years or so. So you don't need to, as long as you're not doing anything too crazy, like you don't really need to worry that much.
Right. So would you say like the a big part of both of those questions goes back to just like following your interests and like curating your experience or being a friendly nerd? Cool. And yeah, let's talk about being a friendly, ambitious nerd and like making friends online and all of that sort of stuff. How would you recommend people to start doing that? Like somebody who just got online and created their Twitter account or whatever, and just like they're trying to find their place and meet people.
Right. Yeah. So the first thing you should do if you just have a new Twitter account and you want to start making friends is even before you start replying to people, you should try and just dump a bunch of thoughts about whatever it is that you are interested in on your timeline, which can be a little bit, if you feel like no one is following you yet, that might seem strange, but you can just think out loud about whatever it is that you like, and you can post links to whatever you like, your favorite TV shows or your favorite, whatever's interesting to you, whatever you're curious about. The point of that, like your first 50 to 100 tweets or whatever, is so that when you then reply to other people, when they see your profile, they can make an informed decision about whether or not they want to follow you back. So like, yeah, have your first, let's say 20 to 50 tweets, or just to show that you're active and that you have some thoughts. The next important thing is to have your bio be something that signals what to expect when people are interacting with you, right? So you really want to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is looking at your profile and wondering if they should reach out, wondering if they should reply, wondering if they should be friends, right? So I recommend, listing out a couple of your interests, and you could say, expect tweets about X or reply to me about Y, right? Like give people something of an in, right? Give them I wouldn't say a script, but just give them a prompt, right? Give them an idea of, oh, if I'm curious about this person, if I want to talk to this person, here's what I can do, and they will like it. Once you have that, a bunch of tweets and a bunch of like a decent bio, and if you have like a personal website, that's great. You can link to it in your bio as well. Then after that, it's all about, I'd say, good reply game. Like follow humans, like don't follow like people with not too many followers. So I wouldn't actually recommend following someone with like tens of thousands of followers. I would recommend looking for people who follow about 1,000-ish people, some like less than 1,000 to maybe a couple of thousand, and similarly with like anywhere from dozens, a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand followers, so that you know that anything that you reply, they will likely see it. So if you're curious about like friendly, ambitious nerd Twitter, right? If you follow me on Twitter and you look at my following list, the people I'm following, a lot of them are, I tend to follow people who are good conversationalists, who like to respond encouragingly and stuff. So you can go through that list and follow interesting people. And if you reply to them with like whatever they are talking about, you just share your own perspective, share your own, like kind of, be supportive and try to be encouraging. When you do that, people will follow you back. Like, and I mean, you can't guarantee that every single person you talk to is gonna follow you back. But like, if you show up repeatedly and try to be interesting or like share what you think is interesting, like from there, that's how the ball starts rolling. And once you have a couple of people following you back, then it's fun. Then now you can start to, it's kind of like logging on to Twitter becomes like going to a coffee shop where all your friends are, or like there are cool people who are interested in talking. And yeah, you can do this with any interest, right? So you can even go on Twitter search and search for whatever topics you are interested in, right? Whether it's blockchain stuff, crypto stuff, whether it's I have this Twitter thread about how to be a sword guy. Like if you decide to have an interest in swords, like weapons, like you can actually look up people. You can do a search. You can like hashtag swords and see who is posting like whatever they have, and you can just follow those people who have that same interest, and then you can just you kind of wait to see if there's anything nice you can say, and then you just kind of linger around for a while, and slowly you'll just kind of pick up context clues. You'll get a sense of what people care about, and you can start replying. And yeah, then once you have like a couple of dozen people following you back, like you're pretty much you're part of a scene or your community, and you can start to feel more and more involved and invested.
That makes sense. And would you say you always knew specifically what your interests are and what what threads you should follow, or like did you feel lost at times and like trying to figure out like what drives you?
I've been around for so long. I must have been confused. When even when I was a kid, I guess I was very into video games, and yeah, I never really had trouble finding them. So I was always interested in a lot of things. So it's if you had asked me to narrow it down to one or two things, then I would probably have been like struggled. But the cool thing about Twitter and the internet is that you can really just follow everything that you're interested in. Often like if there are books that you like you can search for a book on Twitter that you like, and you will see other people who have mentioned that book, and you can make friends that way, right? If you search for a movie, and especially like so if it's like the super popular stuff like Star Wars or something, like there tends to be loads of people talking about it, and it can be kind of chaotic. But like if you search for stuff that's slightly more obscure, then you will find that people who are more eager to have conversations about those things. So like look through your list of favorite movies, favorite books, favorite authors, and all of those things, and then search for those people, and that is usually a better way to find people who will respond. But also I do think that's not to say you can't talk about like popular interests. It's just gonna be a bit more chaotic because you don't know if people are gonna see you, if there's like 1,000 replies to something, right? So if there's 1,000 replies to something, I usually wouldn't bother replying because the odds of someone seeing it is low. So I try to focus on anywhere where replying would be likely to be noticed. I think that's especially when you're starting out and nobody knows who you are. Like trying to leave decent replies or curious replies, asking questions, right? That sort of thing. Yeah, I do think that doing good replies early on. So even if you're a nobody, if you have like 0 followers, but you're following some like micro celebrities or like podcasters or vloggers or whatever, and you post thoughtful stuff in their replies, like their other followers will notice and follow you back, and that's how you can kind of get started until you have enough of your own audience to tweet at them.
Right, yeah. But generally it's easier to get started by finding more niche topics and people, because you're not competing with thousands of people. I think that makes sense. And then what other advice would you give to people who why should people be friendly ambitious nerds?
Oh man, it's so once you have friends around the world who, it doesn't necessarily need to be around the world, but I think if you're going by interest, you will find people all over. But I hear from so many people that like they have some friends from school or wherever else, and they hang out, but they don't really get to discuss their deepest curiosities and interests at great length because they might not just have that much depth in common. And the people that I know, when they finally get a chance to like really explore their deepest curiosities and share their deepest maybe not their deepest feelings, but just share stuff that they've been thinking and feeling that their friends might not be interested in, and then you find someone else who's also interested. Like that's just so it's so humanizing. It makes people feel heard and seen, right? It's the opposite of loneliness, right? Like you really just feel taken care of, even like that people respond positively to the things that you care about. Like that it might be a bit of a struggle to get the first few people when you're starting out. It's worth struggling because once you have that, life just feels so much more nourishing, I would say. Like I'm excited to wake up every day and check in on what my friends are doing, like all over the world, like what's everyone up to, and it's just so fun. And if you keep at it, like I am now at a stage where like I can probably go to any major city in the world and like there will be someone who knows me who wants to like pick me up from the airport and show me around, and there's just it's such a gift, it's such a privilege to have that. And anyone who, if you're like moderately smart, I don't think you need to be a genius. I think you just need to be thoughtful enough to be able to think and consider things. Like if you're moderately intelligent and you're thoughtful about it, and you're just willing to like and you don't even need to like work super hard at it like every day, like you're gonna, I mean, I know some people who've done that. I know some people who are like, okay, this month I'm just gonna tweet like hell and make as many friends as possible. Like you can do that, and if you're inclined to do that, I do recommend it because it's worth kind of front loading that stuff. But even if you don't, even if you're just kind of casually hanging out, but with the mindset that the world is so big, right? And there are people like you out there that you haven't met yet, right? So that was the thought that really kind of got me going when I was starting out and I was a nobody. I was like, surely there are other people like me elsewhere in the world somewhere. Like I can't be, like I'm like maybe my friends in real life, they might not be huge nerds, but like I can't be like 1 in a billion, right? I must be like 1 in 1,000 or something like that, 1 in 10,000 maybe. And the internet allows you to find the other 1 in 10,000 people. And the best way to find those people is to like write stuff, or I guess you can also make like YouTube videos or TikToks or whatever, but to make stuff that functions as like a beacon for other people to find you. And once you do that, eventually your people will find you. And then it's like day and night. Like life becomes so much more fulfilling when you have people who care about what you care about, share your aspirations and dreams and values, right? And like when you meet someone who's just like you in the ways that you care about, it's so easy to want them to do well, to want them to be happy and successful, and you want to see them succeed. And you can then feel comfortable and confident that they feel that way about you as well. And that's just such a great feeling. And if it's something, if there are things that you care about, if you're a writer, right, or if you make stuff, if you're an artist, if you're a musician, whatever, you find your other people, and then who are doing the same thing or doing parallel, similar things, then you can like challenge each other to do better work, right? And because you know that there's an audience, like that you have friends who are interested in what you're doing, like you actually, you want to impress each other, you want to show off and like have a good time. And so people become better at their craft by being in a scene of friends who also care about the same thing. So there's just infinite possibility once you find your people.
Right, yeah, like instant friends, and like as soon as you're vibing with someone, it's like much more likely that everything will go well, like regardless of like just your own interests or like doing things together or whatever. Makes sense. And you also write about how to network as an introvert. Does any of that talk about the real world? I think that's kind of where a lot of introverts struggle the most.
Networking in the real world for introverts, I mean, that's challenging. So my wife is an introvert, and so my joke is, which is true, is that if you can find one extrovert who likes you and they adopt you, right, then you can basically lean on them and ask them to like introduce you, or like you don't necessarily need to do everything yourself. So even this whole friendly ambitious nerd thing, like if someone's listening and they're like, I can't do that, that's just so much work and it's not my vibe and it's not my style, like that's also fine. Like you don't need to, I wouldn't recommend like pressuring yourself and pushing yourself to be someone that you don't feel like you are. You might be into something entirely different. Like you might want to just make stuff but not talk about it that much. And that's also fine, but like the logic of the marketplace is such that like whatever it is, like if you have a job, right, like you need like, and most jobs that you could have, it would involve you contributing to some effort as a collective, as a team, and then the output of that team get interfaces with something else. So it's like eventually there's a proxy to the market. So like somebody in the company or in the business like has to be the extrovert or the outgoing person who goes out and talks to customers or goes out and finds business or whatever. And the same dynamics apply where, so even if we're talking about like social lives and stuff, like if you are not an extrovert, then like, if you are not a networker, like willing to talk to lots of people, you still have to, you don't have to, but like if you don't know anyone at all and you don't talk to anyone at all, then you're gonna have a bad time, because even introverts need some social life at some point. You need a job, you need to find a partner, if unless you're aromantic, I guess. But I share all of these like how to be a good friend, how to be a networker kind of thing, so that it democratizes the skill set for anybody who wants it, but not everyone wants it. So if you don't want it, that's fine, but then you are gonna be reliant on the people who are your access to it. So, in like the traditional model of like an artist and a manager, or an artist and a record label or whatever, like they say, oh, you just make the music and then the manager and the record label take care of everything else. I do find that historically that kind of relationship can get a bit one-sided, and it can get a bit exploitative, because whoever controls the means of distribution gets to set the price, right? They get to set the terms. Like if you're relying on them, so even if it's just whoever is like holding access to the network of people that functions as a proxy of the market, like there's just so much wealth and power and value in that. So if you are an introvert, I hope you find someone that you can trust to be a proxy for you. Like I would not feel comfortable like relying on like one or two people for my social graph needs. But all mileage may vary. Every person is different. But yeah, that's how it goes.
Would you say recommend more so that people not rely so much on other people, or more so that like they find the right people to rely on, like do things with friends?
Yeah, I mean, we have to rely on people one way or the other, right? Like we don't grow our own food, right? Like we don't build our own infrastructure. Like to be human is to rely on other people, but the thing is to try and be smart about it, and to not end up overly reliant on someone that you don't trust, right? Or you can't. Like you want to have options at least. Right, so like even in business or whatever, right? Like whether you're buying a phone or you're using some kind of contract, you want to know that there are like competitors to the brand that you're using, so that if this doesn't work out, you can switch to the other thing, and that just keeps people more honest. And I mean, I don't know if I want to make a super strong comparison between like corporate brands and people, but even with people, it's like if you're really needy, like some of the sad things that happen in relationships, whether it's romantic relationships or like friendships and stuff, is when someone doesn't feel like they can make friends, and so they are super reliant on like the approval of some existing friend or partner. And then that person can feel it like, this person is so needy and dependent on me, and like I am like nobody wants to feel completely responsible for someone else's like well-being. Like it's a difficult enough time being responsible for ourselves. And so yeah, you want to try and cultivate some independence, and you want to try and be okay with things not always working out, and have some options, right? Like don't be way too reliant on any one thing. But I'm not saying like be this hyper individualistic, don't trust anyone, don't rely on any one person either. I think that's not a healthy way to live, and it's not a fun way to live. But just kind of go into things with your eyes open. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say like how much of your own work would you say is like cooperative play versus single player? But it's kind of a dumb question, because like even the writing that you do is like comes from a lot of conversations with other people, and like get feedback loops.
Exactly, yeah.
And so like, yeah, once people have this sort of a stable base and know their interests, and like they have friends and all, like how do they become prolific?
So you don't even need to actually have friends or a stable base to be prolific. Like so for me, it's like it's so simple. It's really just whatever it is that you like, just do a lot of it. And the thing here is that most people's intuitions, I think, are calibrated according to social norms. So it's like if you don't really see many people publishing every day, like publishing a lot of writing every day. So there's no reason why you can't. Like it's I find it helpful just to tell people that you can write a lot. Like you can write more than you think you can write, and if you want to be a good, I'm saying writing because that's my favorite thing to do, but it could be anything, right? It could be writing songs, it could be making videos, making movies, like people underestimate how much they can accomplish. And I don't even mean so. And like I think when you want to get good at something, you have to. There is some amount of volume of output that is inescapable. And I mean, we can get into some arguments about like, oh, how much time should you spend making each thing, or like how much review and study and like should you do as a per unit of work produced. But I would say as long as you're looking at your work with eyes open and you're trying like a best effort ish, right? Like a 60 to 70% best effort most of the time. Like you will learn things just by doing a lot of stuff. Like some people are like emotionally averse to not putting in like 110% into like, so let's say you want to become a songwriter, right? And then you're writing your first song, and then you spend like weeks and weeks on your first song because you want it to be really good. But the problem is, if you're a brand new songwriter and you're writing your first song, not only are you not good at writing songs yet, you also don't even have a strong sense of what a good song is. So you shouldn't spend too much time making your first song because it's going to be bad no matter what. So you should, instead of trying to write one good song and it's still going to be bad no matter what, you should write a few different bad songs. And once you've written like 5 to 10 bad songs, you can compare all of them and you can be like, well, what's bad about this one? Which one is the least bad? You know, what do I like more? What do I like less? What do I like about this one? You know, and then you can start experimenting and you can mess around with it. And my argument is that the faster you go through this process, the faster you will learn. And so like if you write 100 songs and like it's very difficult to write 100 songs that are all bad. Like even if you try on purpose, like I'm going to write 100 bad songs, like at least like 5 of them will be surprisingly good by accident. And then as long as you have some taste and you have some sensitivity, you're like, oh shit, I accidentally made a good song here. Like that's still yours. And you can then, you know, throw away the 95 songs that were bad and keep the 5 songs that are good. And as long as making songs or writing or like producing stuff is affordable, like in most, and you know, in this day and age with like our media costs, like recording videos and uploading them to YouTube is free, right? So like recording podcasts is basically free. Like all these things are free. So you might as well just do as much as you can and like let external forces sort it out, like what's good and what's not. And then you can always delete stuff if you don't like it and stuff like that. But it's way, way, way better than like agonizing over one thing when you're not yet good at anything. And so usually the thing people struggle with here is like they want things to be good, but they don't want to accept that they have to make bad stuff to get to good. And when people are like that, they get stuck because there's no way to get good without first being bad. So you really just have to, if you like something and you want to get good at it, you just have to accept the fact that you're going to be bad at it first. And if you're really shy, you can try and be bad about it in private. You can like make a bunch of stuff on a secret, or you know, don't have to tell anyone, or you can use a fake name or whatever, just make a bunch of bad stuff. And then you just have, as you increase that volume of output and you examine it, you will get better at it. And then it's so satisfying to be good at stuff in life, right? Whatever it is that you're making. And the other cool thing is, let's say you've recorded 100 songs. Even if all 100 songs are not that great, you will learn things in the process of making 100 songs, right? So even with my videos, like when I was making YouTube videos, I made about like, I think 17 videos of me just talking into my webcam before I started to notice that, hey, like the lighting actually makes a difference in how nice the video looks. And so I like almost like 17 videos in, I started thinking, oh, how should I adjust my camera such that the lighting is nicer? And then you start thinking about sound, you start thinking about like, there are all these new considerations that start coming up very organically. And even if all 100 things you make is not super great, you will learn stuff. And the stuff that you learn will be interesting to other people who also want to make those things. And it's interesting to anyone. I think if you're like at a dinner party or something, and you be like, and people ask you, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I just finished recording 100 songs, right? They're like, oh, what was that like? You know, what was the experience? What do you learn? And so when you have a story, so being prolific is a journey that you undertake, and journeys are always interesting. You're now a traveler in a sense, right? And once you have interesting stories, that becomes an angle that you can use to have conversations with people. So now, being prolific helps you make more friends. Right? Just like everything just kind of feeds on itself.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, a lot of people want like the magic solution, or like they take all the considerations before getting started, and then they get discouraged after doing two things. But it really comes down to like doing a lot of things, like a lot of repetition, like do 100 of the same thing,
and be okay with it being bad. Just tell yourself that, I'm in my beginner era or whatever, right? Like tell yourself that you'll reserve quality for after your, like, for your 101st video or song or podcast, then it'll be good, right? If you watch, I think there's this video of like Joe Rogan's first podcast, and it's like the first 15 minutes he couldn't even connect to the internet or something. It's just terrible. And it's like, that's just the way it is. Like you can't expect to be good before you start. So commit to doing stuff badly on purpose. And even if people make fun of you or whatever, like, take it in your stride and be like, well, I'm a beginner, and like, thanks for feedback or whatever, and like check back in 100 videos, right? But that kind of thing. And when you can have that confidence, just that belief that you will get better with experience, like that is very it's very freeing as well. Like, you don't need to worry about, it's like, it's really becomes you don't have to worry about how good something is. It's really, you just trust the process, and you allow the process to make better and better work, and you're almost like a witness to the process rather than like the person in charge.
Right. Yeah, and then it kind of becomes this self-motivating loop, as you said, like, as you get better and you're happy with it, and then like pushes you forward. Makes sense. And, we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to touch on good marketing. Like, marketing in some places has started to have a bad name, and like in crypto, there's a lot of projects that are all marketing and very little substance. So like, what is good marketing, and how to do good marketing?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. So I used to work in software marketing in my previous day job. And I would say the main thing that makes marketing bad usually is the insistence on like immediate outcomes. So it's like the pushiness and the neediness to be like, I need you to buy this thing now. I need you, like, limited time offer, like trying to manufacture FOMO and trying to like really rush people into something that they might not be ready for. And marketing doesn't have to be that way, but there is like a kind of sad optical illusion where most people will remember the worst marketing they've encountered, the most frustrating, annoying pop-ups and stuff, and that's what they will associate with marketing. But what I think of as good marketing is you have to be patient. You're like, I'm not going to rush anyone into like buying our stuff or whatever. And it's really more about understanding. So I mean, for whatever marketing you're doing, it's like for some product or some, community or some idea or whatever. And people need, products or ideas, or like there is this idea space, right? Like, so people have problems, right? And products should be solutions to those problems. And marketing, I would say, is about understanding that problem space as well as you can, and being a participant in that problem space to help people understand problems and solutions better. So if you try and imagine, let's say you want, let me pick something random. Let's say you want to buy or you think you want to play music, right? I already brought up music earlier. So let's say you think you want to play music, but you don't really know what you want, and like you go to a music store, right, with a bunch of equipment and stuff, and imagine there's having a really great experience. Like, what is that like? Like, so there's this music technician or sales guy or whatever, and he's like, hey, how can I help you, right? And then you're like, oh, I decided that I want to play music, but I don't know where to start, and I don't know what I should do. Then he'll start asking you questions, right? Like what kind of music do you like, and like what's your favorite band, or what how do you feel like playing? Like, he would ask you a bunch of questions and try to help you understand what your preferences are. And at the end of that interaction, if he does his job well in helping you understand your own challenges well, like, at the point where you decide to buy something, it's not gonna feel like he's pushing you to buy it. It's rather you should feel like you made that choice yourself, right? And you were presented with that choice, in a way that made you feel confident about what you were doing, right? And he tells you, I think this is better for that, this is better for this, blah blah blah, and assuming they're honest, right? And yeah, I mean, I can talk about this for hours, but like basically, good marketing, I would say, it should respect the consumer. It should respect the person's time and attention and what their needs are. And I also say, like, play long games. Like, life is so short, and it's so tragic if you spend like your precious time on this earth like trying to scam people into buying something that's not good for them. Like, why not? I mean, maybe I'm a bit idealistic, but I've always been like this. Like, why not advocate for products that you really like, things that you think are really useful, things that you enjoy, and if it's stuff that you really care about and you think it's actually helpful to people, then you can cultivate a reputation for being actually useful to people. And that's something that the value of that really compounds over time. And I think some people just don't think very far ahead. They're just like, I got to get a job now, and I got to pay the bills now, and I would like, some fancy stuff now or soon. So I'm not going to think too much about this. But if you take the trouble to cultivate a reputation for being honest and for trying to help people get good deals, and like, in every interaction I have with anybody that works with me in any capacity, I want them to feel like they got more than their money's worth, right? And so while that might mean like, there have been times where I slightly undercharge for something and so on, I don't mind, because in the long run, like, everyone that you talk to who has ever worked with me will recommend, like, oh yeah, working with Visa is a great idea because he's just great, And once you reach that stage, which comes from like doing a bunch of stuff that is like not necessarily immediately obviously lucrative, you do that, and you have a reputation that precedes you, and people want to work with you, and then at that point, like, you can like do whatever you want almost. I'm still some way off from that, but like I've witnessed enough people doing that I just think it's a better way to live. And it feels good. It feels good to be honest and to know that everyone who interacts with you and works with you gets a good deal and is happy for having done it. And it does take more work, but like, again, if you actually care about people and you make sure that you work with people that you care about and you want like long-term healthy relationships with people, like, that's the obvious way to go, right? As opposed to like, I mean, what is even the point, like, if you find some way to scam people and get rich quick and pump and dump or whatever, and then like in a few years, maybe you have some money, but like, imagine like all your friends are also the people that did pump and dump stuff with you, and you're all kind of like, do you trust them? Like, do they trust you? Like what? Right? Like, at the end of the day, life is short, and you want like good people in your life. I think that's the deepest wealth. It's like real good relationships with people you trust.
Right. Yeah. So it mainly comes down to like thinking short term versus a long term. Like.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to put it. Like, just really, like, if you want to build a company, like, think about how can you make the company a great place to work, over like 10 years plus, and like, people like to work there, people like trust the product, trust the customer support, the company culture. Like, it's such a nice thing to do, to like build a healthy culture where people can feel happy and trust that their work will be valued and all of those things. Yeah, like, so it's so much more gratifying, I think.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And then with this short term, long term, also, like, it reminds me of what I wanted to ask you previously, like when you said that like you don't have to have the stable basis to become prolific at something. And then the question is like how much does being prolific correlate with happiness? And like, people have this notion like, if you want to be really successful at something, like you're not supposed to spend too much time socializing, you're not gonna like focus on the family, on like relationship and that sort of stuff. You just like have to like grind at what you want to be super successful at. And then there's a lot of people, it seems like, that are successful but not very happy, and you kind of it looks like you you got both.
I try, yeah.
So what would you recommend?
I mean, each person needs to face themselves in the mirror, or go on a long walk by themselves and ask themselves really, like, what kind of life do you really want? What really makes you happy? What really fulfills you? Why do you do what you do? What do you care about? And like for me, my driving thing is I often think about what it was like when I was a kid, and I used to feel like lonely and isolated, and like I'm always thinking about the next kid like myself out there. And so I get a lot of satisfaction from helping people and trying to find the next person like myself to help. And when I get feedback from people like that, they DM me and stuff, like it makes my whole day, week, month, like to have made a positive difference to people. And maybe not everyone is motivated by that kind of thing. So it depends on, like, it's really not a contest. I think Montaigne said, like, on your deathbed, like, no clever words and no rationalization and all that will help. Like, you really come face to face with, were you proud of your life? Like, you are the final decider about whether or not you had a life that you are proud of. And yeah, so I mean, success in like conventional sense is nice to have, I guess. But like I do think you have to ask, like, who are you sharing it with? Okay, the thing I would recommend is, like, study the lives of the people that you admire, like, closely, and see how they talk about it. Because you'll find there are a lot of people who are, like, successful conventionally and unhappy, like you said, right? I think I remember reading about Shaquille O'Neal, who was saying that, I have this very big house, but, like, I'm all alone in this house. And it's like, no, but, like, and it's, I mean, I think he's doing better now, but, like, there are things about traditional success that people chase, I think, without thinking very much. Like, they just kind of assume that, everyone seems to celebrate them, therefore they must be happy. But, like, the celebrations, it's very fleeting. It's like you get, I think athletes will say, like, the podium finish with the gold medal and everyone cheering for you, that's like, a day, like a week maybe, and then you go back to your life. And it's like, for an athlete like that, it's like that life is training every day for years and years. So you better, and if you want to be an athlete, like, it's more important that you enjoy the training than you enjoy the medal finish, because the medal finish is like, it's almost an accident. It's like it's one day out of 10,000 days, right? So it's the other 9,000. Most of your life is in the day to day. So you shouldn't sacrifice most of your life for, like, one podium finish, right? Like, it should be a thing that you enjoy for its own sake. Like, you should do a thing where you enjoy the training, so that, because the podium is not guaranteed, the medal is not guaranteed, you might not get it. So at least if it's something you love and then you don't get the medal, you don't beat yourself about it, because most people are not gonna win Oscars, and most people are not gonna be president. Most people are not, like, those outcomes are very rare. So you shouldn't hold your happiness hostage based on, like, the outcome, right? Like, you should enjoy the process. And it does seem that very often the people who enjoy the process end up outperforming the people who don't anyway. So it's almost not even really a choice, right? It's like, ask yourself what you enjoy and try and spend time in that space.
Yeah, that's well said. And yeah, like, even if it was common, like, people just focus so much on the highlights and, like, the very best parts, like, they see on Instagram, rather than, like, the trade-off of, like, getting to those highlights.
Yeah.
You talked a bit about the bigger picture of, like, what you see as the end goal of having more people be friendly, ambitious nerds. You want to talk a bit more about that?
The thing about big goals is that they can be compelling. Like, I mean, so ideally they give you a big, audacious, like, bold, ambitious vision to be excited about. But the thing you want to be careful is not to be overly fixated on it, because we don't actually know the future and we can't know things for sure. But yeah, how I like to think about it is, I like to examine history. Like, I'm a bit of a history nerd, and I'm always curious to understand, like, how has human progress historically played out. And it's tempting to think that human progress must have happened kind of in a steady upward trajectory. But if you actually look closely, it's not a steady climb. It's very, very sharp, sudden bursts of progress in very small amounts of time and space. So like, during the Renaissance in Florence and Italy, during the Baghdad Golden Age when they invented algebra and chemistry, and like the Gupta Golden Age in India, they invented zero, right? There are all these different during the Enlightenment. There's all these different clusters of space and time. Like, during Einstein's era, when they were making a lot of progress in physics, it's like there was a cluster of people who were all passionate and curious about the same things, and they were all kind of connected to each other. And so the more I read up about these historical scenes, right? So even literary scenes like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and their friends, they all hang out. And I often find that whenever you examine greatness in any domain, you will almost always find that it was never a solo effort. There was always like a cluster of people. Like often there's like one or two people who get the lion's share of the credit and the like accolades and stuff. But there's always multiple people, so Einstein, he would hang out at Max Planck's house, and Max Planck would host house parties with his wife, and like all the physicists would come and they'll play a violin and sing and have dinner and all those things. So the idea there, if you examine enough history, it seems obvious that greatness happens when you cluster great people together. And so the vision here is to like find as many ambitious, friendly, curious people, friendly, ambitious nerds basically, in all over the world, right? Doing whatever it is that they're interested in. And then if we find 100,000 people like that all over the world, and then we can introduce them to each other based on their specific interests, and then they can challenge each other and collaborate and push each other. So earlier I was saying, like be prolific, right? Like make a lot of stuff. The easiest way to make more stuff is if you have someone else who's also making stuff and also interested in the same thing as you, and then you like race each other, right? There's this great video of Pharrell Williams and Timbaland, like the two music producers. Like they were both kind of like comparing the beats that each other made, and they both have such an encyclopedic knowledge of like the other person's beats because they're both such students of the craft, and they care so much about making great beats. And like that creative rivalry between Pharrell and Timbaland, like that, the average person listening to music on the radio might not even know who those producers are, but their rivalry shaped a lot of popular music in that like decade. And similarly, like there are all kinds of great things that happen in great scenes where a small group of people competing and collaborating with each other end up having this disproportionate outsized impact on the world, right? On first of all, I mean in their domain first of all, but like beyond it as well. There's this letter that Marshall McLuhan, he wrote to Ezra Pound in, I think it was in the 40s or 60s. I can never get the date right. But like they were talking about, hey, how do we bring together a dozen talented people in our city, like a really, really talented people, and get them to just talk and share ideas and see what happens. And it's kind of a sad letter to read because Marshall makes it sound like they know some people, but they don't really know how to coordinate them because they're all over the place and they don't know, like those people don't know each other. And I'm always thinking, man, those people didn't have Twitter, they didn't have email, they didn't have YouTube, and they didn't have the opportunity to coordinate. But we do. We have the technology, right? So it's up to us to kind of make our predecessors' dreams come true, like to connect the best people in the world with each other. It's already kind of happening, which I'm grateful for, but like I think we can accelerate it. I think we can be more deliberate in finding the best people that we know and introducing them to each other and just repeating that over and over again. And if we can get to like, 1 million of the world's most talented, most curious, most ambitious people, and we can inspire them to like challenge and inspire them to challenge and inspire each other, basically, then we should see, is it possible to like kind of deliberately encourage another golden age in our lifetimes? I think it should be, and so like that's the bigger dream. Like, the bigger dream is if we get enough of the right people looking at the same things or looking at each other and challenging each other and really, like dream big. I think there's a quote from David Ogilvy where he says like strive for the company of immortals. Like don't just try to make money making money is cool, but like what's cooler is if you can like advance the species in some way, right? If you can find a new way of I'm not a scientist, so I don't think I will be making scientific innovations in my lifetime, but I do think that we can innovate on culture. So like part of this friendly ambitious nerd thing is really to cultivate this high openness, high trust culture in the commons where people are very encouraging and supportive of each other, and kind of like people don't need to feel like they should keep their head down and not make a mess and not upset anybody, and be more of like, hey, let's just have 10,000 people, 100,000 people who are just all super high functioning and encouraging and kind of like nudging each other to be the best versions of themselves. And I know that there are other people also doing other versions of this, which is great. Like we can all just like combine forces and continually like network more and more of the planet. And I just want to do my part to accelerate that as much as I can.
That makes complete sense. And I think whoever wasn't convinced that they should become one should be convinced now. And especially as you touched on, like it's never been easier. Like all of these people previously, like these pockets of action, like it's been much harder to get because like you need to have people in proximity. But now it's all so connected. Like you can gather people from across the world that are interested in this niche topic. And thank you for coming on, for finding time. It's been a lot of fun.
No worries, this is fun for me too. Thank you for having me.